Hi guys, here we go. Another attempt here on number 12. This is Alien Contact in Bob's Life. And go ahead, Bob.
Okay. This is our third attempt on this particular segment. Since we're dealing with different types of entities and the like, excuse me, not all non-terrestrials fly in spaceships. Not all non-terrestrials are the gray ETs walking around or whatever. Some non-terrestrials are from different dimensional realms. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. And evidently we had a demonic coming through this evening a little while ago that caused problems with the system. This segment we're trying to do now, this is the third attempt. I got the demonic out of the way. I don't want to spend any more time talking about that because it's not the mainstay of what we're doing, and it's something we've had to put up with for quite a while, even before I came here to Chicago. And now, since I've been here, a lot of strange things happen, and you'd think we'd get used to it, but you never really get used to it. It's like whenever you have a collection of light, elements of darkness want to try to stomp on it, only to find themselves being stomped on, and in some cases shredded.
But it's a common thing what they do.
Yeah,
You know?
it's meant to wear you down or intimidate you, or mostly to wear you down.
I'm trying to say fucking with electronics.
Right.
Because it's electrical energy. It's a lot easier to fuck with than we're strong, determined people, so we're pretty fucking unflappable. But a lot of times they will come through and fuck with the electrical systems, equipment, because it's pretty. As consciousness goes, it's pretty very low consciousness, so it's easily affected by these type bastards. In this case, the camera froze, completely froze up. It stopped recording and it froze up. I couldn't turn it on and off, and I was in the office for a couple minutes, and at the same time that happened. It blew out my expensive halogen desk light, and anyway, we got the camera going again, but then it screwed up a second time, and I'm not sure what that was about. But shit happens, but we just won't let things like that stop us much.
Right. So here we go again. We were talking about my getting into out-of-body skills. My excuse me, my first attempts at going out into space and doing an orbit they sucked. I was lousy. If I was over the Earth in space, I could get out there. That was no big deal. But beautiful. Big deal in that it was beautiful. And it is. By the way, for flat earthers, happens to be round.
I said that last time.
I know. I'm just saying it again. Don't mean to burst your Beelzebubble, but fact is, it's round. And I would end up zigzagging all over the place if I was trying to do an orbit. I did actually make it to the moon on my first attempt out of body. into space. I got down to the ground. And then as soon as I got there, boom, I'm back in space again. That's how lousy my attempts were.
What, no bang zoom to the moon, Alice?
I should have said, hey, Houston, we got a problem. I didn't. Finally, I taught myself to go point to point to point to point to point to point to point, from one point to the next in a curved path, and was able to get comfortable in doing orbits of bodies in space. Now it's nothing to it. It's easy.
Now you're doing pirouettes out there.
Right. One of my early out-of-body attempts, my mom had been visiting some friends in Virginia, and she came back and said, "Bob, I want to test your out-of-body skills." I said, "Sure." She said, "Well, try to find the house where I was visiting and describe the living room of these friends of mine to me." I did. And apparently, according to my mom, I got it all exactly right. But then when I looked over the couch, she in fact at one point said, "Describe the painting over the couch." And what I saw, I couldn't believe. I thought I must be really messing up, you know. I saw a sea scene. Seascapes are pretty and all that, but this wasn't pretty. This was an angry storm, high waves at sea, and a ship that looked like it was about to go under. And I'm thinking, who would have a painting like that over their couch? I mean, no way. And I told her, I said, "I think I've really messed up." I told her what I saw, and she said, "That's exactly what it is." Okay. Some months later, my cousin, whom I'm going to call Sharon, came from Atlanta, Georgia, where she lived, to visit us in Florida, and she said that her boyfriend, who was an apartment complex manager, like a superintendent, he had served in the Vietnam War, was wounded. They had to replace part of the top of his skull with a metal plate. Every time the air pressures would change, like if a cold front came through, for example, it would give him a 3-day-long migraine headache. His doctors told him they couldn't do any more for him. They gave him pain relievers. It didn't work. I want to make a statement here about this, that our veterans deserve better than this. A lot better. While I'm not a proponent of war, I certainly do respect our people in the armed services who are giving up their time and their families, their lives, to try to serve this country overseas. They deserve better when they come back. And their families deserve a lot more understanding and care too, because they're having to give up their loved one to go overseas and serve. I described this guy's apartment, even nitpicky tiny little stuff that you wouldn't normally think of. Sharon, my cousin, said that was right, everything. Then I said, "Well, I don't understand is he's laying on his couch, he's trying to sleep, I think he's sleeping, but I feel pain." She said, "That's the headache I told you about, the migraine that started today. They last 3 days." And I said, "He's got a small personal-sized TV on a shelf at the foot of his couch." And I said, "Who puts a TV on the shelf at the foot of the couch? I must be wrong." She said, "No, you're exactly right, because that's exactly what he has." And I said, "Well, it looks like there's a race car program on, some racing program." And she said, "Yeah, he loves racing. He always has racing programs on." I said, "Well, he's going to wake up at 3 in the morning and his headache's going to be gone." And she said, "Bob, I think you're wrong about that part." The next day she came over and said, "You know, whatever you did, you touched with healing." And those were her words. Because he did wake up at 3 in the morning. He looked over at the clock. It was exactly 3 o'clock. His headache was gone. Another out-of-body example, during one of our Apollo missions, and I know there are many people who say we never went to the moon. I've heard all of it, and Not going to waste time dealing with that this evening. I was in college one day. I wasn't driving at that time. In fact, I was waiting for my mom to come pick me up after my last course one afternoon, and I was sitting on one of the benches outside the college. And I did an out of body, and I saw the lunar lander was still in space orbiting over the moon. And I kept picking up the word gimbal engines, and I didn't know what that meant. Was Gimbal the name of the company that made the engines or something, or what? I didn't know. And I thought I was probably wrong because they were supposed to have already landed. My mom drives up, I get in the car, she says, they haven't landed. And I said, yeah, they're supposed to have by now. She said, they can't, there's something wrong. But we got home, turned the TV on, and out of the command module window, they were showing the picture of the lunar lander upside down in orbit over the moon, just like I had seen it. The announcer was mentioning something about the engines were not gimbaling properly. They weren't swiveling the way they should properly to help guide the lunar lander in a proper safe path to do the landing. They were talking about maybe having to abort the mission. Luckily at the last minute they fixed it and were able to land, and I guess I've heard other explanations about that ETs didn't want them to land at the time and finally they got the okay to land. I've heard a whole bunch of things, some of which I disbelieve and some of which I partially believe. Another example, we come a little closer in time, in the early 90s with the original Gulf War. Saddam Hussein was invading Kuwait, and I decided to, my body is in Central Florida, a city in Central Florida. My soul was looking in Iraq. I saw a truck with what looked like really old style missiles on it, and it dawned on me those probably are Russian, out of date Russian missiles that I bet the Soviets got a pretty penny for selling it to the Iraqis. And then I started hearing the word shud, scud, shud, scud. I didn't know why. 2 days later, on the news, they began saying that the Iraqis had some old-style Russian missiles that Saddam Hussein had had some work done on them to improve them, and that the name of the missiles were Scud. Actually, some of them were launched during that war. These are just some, it's a godlike experience. There's nowhere you can't look in on. So this is one of the skills that was opened up by my learning to go up through the crown chakra and get out of my body. It's like with seeing auras. When I first started seeing auras, I saw what just looked like a different zone of air around a person. A little lighter, a little darker, no real color to it. Then later on I began seeing colors in the aura, and then, again this goes back in the early 70s, I began actually seeing thought forms in people's auras. Some which dealt with past lives, some in this life. I know one woman at an Edgar Cayce meeting, ARE meeting, one evening I saw this beautiful ornate looking cross that she was wearing, and I complimented her on it. And I said, "Where'd you put it?" She said, "Bob, I didn't wear any cross tonight." And I said, "Yeah, you did. I saw it earlier when you were walking around. Where'd you put it?" And she said, "No, you don't understand. That cross deals with my life when I was a nun in France." It showed up apparently strong enough in her aura field that it looked solid to me.
It's interesting she knew about her life in France.
Yeah, yeah. These are different skills that were developing back then in the 70s, and that I was able to take further and work with. And I can look back now and see, like, stepping, steps on a ladder. I don't really like using that analogy, but preparations for what was to come next. Now, in the 1990s, as I had previously told you, I was trying to look for a way to fight against the gray ETs, and I believe we've got that already on another segment where I did kill runs in space, out of body, what I call kill runs. Before that happened, when I was out of body, sort of ran into some Pleiadians. I asked them to please help me, to please stop the Greys from abducting me. It was more than I could put up with. It was happening too often. Even once is 10 times too often. They told me they would not stop the Greys. Apparently, it's something about if they did, it could start a shooting war between them and the reptilians. But they did say they could arrange for me to have 2 weeks without abductions, which they did. They did do that. I don't know how they did it, but they did. I haven't had much dealings with Pleiadians. I really haven't. I think they are spiritually advanced in their own way. They have a kick-ass technology. But I think they're very guarded about how they use it and who they use it for and against. Trying to think where I want to go with this now. After I successfully began getting rid of gray ETs, I then began targeting reptilians, and they began targeting me too. You notice the light in here just got a little brighter. In one case, I was laying on a bed on a spacecraft with what looked like sort of almost like a coffin-shaped framework around me, not right over me, but near me, made of wood, kind of a reddish color wood, pretty. And one of the reptilians, through thought projection, said, "We are honoring you. You have been a teacher of ours in the past, but that doesn't mean that you have the right to attack us now. And if you continue to come after us, then not even your Father, who's in the hereafter, is going to be able to help you." And I just said, "Go to hell." I said, "You think you can do anything to me? Go for it, because you're next on my list. Unless you change, I'll wipe out your civilization." I said, right now, Earth is the nexus for change throughout the multiverse. And no, it's not happening right this second everywhere. It's going to ripple out. And I said, so you're either part of the solution or part of the problem. If you're going to continue to be part of the problem that you have been, then it's time for you to go. You either grow or go. I got sent back. I was walking across my yard, in fact. I had, at that time, little solar-powered lights. They had grown dim. They were still on. So it must have been 4 o'clock or later in the morning. They weren't nice enough to put me back into my bedroom. But things developed to where I began attacking and asking Michael also to mount attacks against some of the reptilian homeworlds and base worlds. And as I said in the previous segment, they were having to vacate to different places that normally no one would want to even consider occupying. They were having to terraform different bases. And
Excuse me. Now, just to clarify, I don't remember you doing that before you came to Chicago, did you?
mhm,
Oh, you did. You
Oh,
started
yes.
going to reptilians for.
Definitely.
Okay, because I know there was a huge war that Heaven mounted against the reptilians after you came to Chicago.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to. I was wondering. Okay.
okay, the reptilians began to see the wisdom of changing for the better finally. In fact, some of that started while I was still in Florida, but it was limited. And remember at that time I was doing out-of-body projections onto some of their crafts and talking how dark it was inside, the dim, it was real.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. A while after I got here, I need to know how much time we have left.
Oh.
What?
You're right on the money.
Okay.
We'll pick it up in a minute.